I realized at some point during the cross-examination and misheard that two of the jury members in that box actually turned away from her and like physically turned their backs to her and were just looking at me. And I thought to myself in that moment, we got them. Because now they're just paying attention to my questions. It almost didn't matter whether she was what she said, in response. And that's when you've got them.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Isidro Zuniga Vasquez. I'm the founder and president of Latino Students in Law. And today we're joined by a very special guest, Camille Vasquez. And just a little bit more about Latino Students in Law. We're a relatively new organization here on campus that focuses on providing resources to Latino undergraduate students pursuing a career in law. And our mission is to advance diversity in the legal profession. And this is actually our last event of the semester. And so I'm so excited that we could end the semester with this discussion. Camille, how does it feel to be back at USC, even through this virtual format?
I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Isidro. And it's very nice to see most of you or see your names. It gives me a lot of pride and I feel really proud of my Trojan community. And I was one of you not that long ago. At least I like to think I'm not that long ago, but I was definitely one of you interested in going to law school and interested in the legal field and not really having any mentors or people, at least in my family, that I could look up to in this profession. So I'm really glad and happy to be here with all of you this afternoon.
Yeah, and we're so glad to have you. And this is actually your last week of classes before finals. I'm sure you miss taking finals. I
do.
So it's very nice to take a break from studying, to meet you and learn more about your outstanding career. To begin, take us all the way back. So you're from Southern California, specifically from Orange County. Growing up, your father managed a hotel and you were essentially raised at his workplace. What was that experience like, and what did you learn throughout the years?
You've done your homework, Isidro. Yes. I had a really unique childhood. My dad worked for Hilton Hotels his whole career until the company became a private company. And a lot of the executives at the time were forced into retirement. But growing up, yes, he was the resident manager, was the number 2 at the Anaheim Hilton and Towers, which is the big green one. I don't know if any of you are familiar, next to Disneyland. So I had a weird childhood, right? I mean, we always had our home in Buena Park. My parents still live there to this day. And, it was a very modest middle-class home. But yet my sister and I, Cherie, were raised in this, really large hotel with staff and, restaurants and celebrities would come and stay. And it was a very strange childhood, but we always knew that we were examples of our father and we were in his place of employment. So I would say that I grew up really quickly and around adults from a young age. But, yes, it was a unique childhood and a unique upbringing.
Yeah, definitely. Your story really resonates with me. Like many of my peers, I'm the son of Mexican immigrants, and it's always inspiring to hear more about the experience of other, children of immigrants. So your mother's from Cuba and your father is from Colombia. Yes. Looking back, how do you think your identity as the daughter of immigrants has shaped the way you go about life and your career?
I think it's played a huge role. I mean, it is the only thing I've known, right? I mean, everything from being young and experiencing, I think I was in 6th grade. I had a 6th grade teacher, male teacher, my first one. And, he wasn't, I wouldn't go as far as to call him racist, but he was less complimentary to children in his class that were of Hispanic backgrounds. And I noticed that. And that was probably my first exposure to someone being treated differently or seeing my peers that were Hispanic being treated differently. Like, for example, you know, I didn't attend ESL classes. My mom really pushed for both my sister and I to be put into the English speaking classes, right? So I wasn't growing up in grade school. I didn't attend the special ESL classes. And, you know, she pushed for it, and she was like, they'll learn the language, they'll figure it out, because Spanish is my first language. I didn't learn to speak English until I started school in kindergarten. That was my first real immersion into speaking English. But I remember being in sixth grade and seeing my peers that were in those ESL classes, and he put them all in on one table. Right. And I thought that was such a disservice to them, because they were going to fall behind. You have to hear the English language, you have to assimilate, right? And that's the way you learn languages. That's the way you know, if you have an accent, you can listen to other accents, you can, and I just remember coming home and telling my parents, that was just one small example, but I was like, you know, this person, I'm not going to say his name, put all the Hispanic kids, you know, on one table. And I just think that's wrong. And, you know, there were many examples of him, treating us differently. And it really bothered me. And then, you know, realizing that my parents said to both my sister and me, you know, you are going to be treated differently just because of your last name, even before you open your mouth. And, you know, we don't want you to feel that you don't deserve to be somewhere, or that, you know, you are different than other kids because they have blonde hair and blue eyes. So we want you to always feel like this is your country. You were born here. This is your country. And, you know, you belong at that table just as much as anybody else does. So I think from a very young age, it wasn't that I ever had a chip on my shoulder. I think my parents struck a really good balance of showing us you should be proud of where your parents came from and your background and your culture, but you are just as American as anybody else, and you deserve to have the same opportunities as anyone else. And that might mean you have to work a little harder and be more prepared than your colleagues and your, you know, people you're competing against, but so be it. Be that person so that you are not judged differently or have chances taken away from you just because somebody, you know, isn't the most fair.
Yeah, definitely. Wow, thank you for sharing that story. You know, my father always instilled a similar mindset to that, and always saying, you know, you're the same as everyone else around you. You know, they have two eyes, you have two eyes. You can compete to the same level. It doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter where I'm from. It really just comes down to you. So that story, again, just really resonates with me. So in other interviews, you're always joking about how your parents only gave you two career options, doctor or lawyer. How did you make the decision to follow a career in law? Is this something you knew you wanted to do since you were little?
Basically, I mean, it's a joke, but there's a lot of truth, you know, in the joke. My parents, especially my mother, I mean, she had two daughters, right? And for her, it was paramount that they never have to rely on anyone, specifically a man, but, you know, anyone. They wanted us to be independent and to have our education. And they would say to us, we're not leaving you with much in terms of the traditional much, right? Homes, money, but we are leaving you with your education. And that is something that no matter what happens in life, you can always go back to it. You have a profession. And so, yes, they did quite well. They got one of each. My sister is a doctor. She's a pediatrician in Los Angeles, at Kaiser. Cherie also attended USC. She married her college sweetheart, who's a doctor as well. He's a quarter Mexican. You know, they have a little girl now. So wow. I wasn't ever very good at math and science, admittedly, like those were just not strong subjects for me. You know, I had tutors growing up. I think I got my first C and like only C in math in high school. Like, you know, it was tough for me. I really struggled with math and science. So if I wasn't going to be good at math and science, I had to choose the other profession, which relied more on
Yeah.
the speaking and reading comprehension, which I was better at. So yeah, I mean, from a young age, I was always pretty mouthy. My mom would joke that, I was very opinionated. I wasn't afraid to share my passion with whoever would listen about any injustice I saw.
Yeah.
So, from a young age, she would look at me and be like, this one's going to be the lawyer. Esta va a
Mhm.
ser la abogada. And I think that's very true it was just kind of instilled in me, and I really didn't have much of a choice.
Okay, okay. And so once you decide to go into law, how did you go about pursuing your goal? For example, what type of extracurricular activities were you involved in high school?
So in high school, I participated in mock trial. Here, my junior and senior year of high school, we started to have mock trial and compete in the Constitutional Rights Foundation of Orange County's mock trial program, which is fantastic. I actually was just there last week, Thursday, at their award ceremony, speaking to those high school students. And I, really excelled in that program. And that was probably my first introduction to what being a lawyer really could be like. And I realized that being in the courtroom was really where I was most comfortable. I felt an exhilaration when I was preparing to go to compete in court, but then when I got to court, I found myself really calm, like surprisingly calm and focused, like laser focused. And I just felt really at home there. So that was my first introduction. And then at USC, I was a political science and legal communication double major. And I was pre-law. So I definitely try to choose classes that, were geared towards the study of law. I took a couple classes at Annenberg that were taught by real practitioners, real lawyers. And I would always try to find internships, volunteer opportunities to work in law firms and just start networking, because I realized that, especially after I took the LSAT, I wasn't going to go to a certain type of Ivy League law school. And I was never a great standardized test taker. And so I had good grades, but the test score wasn't high enough to get me into Harvard or Yale or, even USC. And so I realized that to get ahead, you just have to network. You have to start meeting people that are doing this job, so that when you graduate or you're looking for a summer internship in law school, you can go to them and say, will you hire me to work at your firm? And you'd be surprised how many people will say yes. You just need to start proving yourself. So I worked in the mailroom, at the first law firm that I ever worked with here in Orange. And I sorted mail, with the staff. And I would go to the lawyers and be like, oh, do you have a deposition or do you have a hearing I could go and shadow you at? And I was just curious. People really love talking about themselves. The sign of a good interview is if the other person talks more than you do. So just ask questions, be curious, and you'd be surprised, how many people want to be help to you.
Yeah. And so I wanted to touch on what you were just saying. So after you graduated from USC, you attended Southwestern Law School here in Los Angeles. And like you said, often there's this expectation, and it's almost drilled into us, that we have to go to an elite law school like Harvard, Stanford, Yale, to even think about being successful in our career. But clearly you have defied this stereotype. Could you tell us about other ways that you maybe leverage the resources at Southwestern to get internships and jobs? Did you have any mentors that connected you to these opportunities?
It was less in law school, to be honest with you. It was more what I did in college. So you guys are all really at a great position. In that mock trial program, my coaches, two of them were district attorneys in the Orange County office, in the homicide unit, actually. And so when I was in law school, I asked them, do you have an internship program? And they said yes. And they got me into the internship program in the DA's office. And, it was through that I just kept in touch with people, and I think that's really it. And there were a couple professors that had their own law firms that I attended classes in at USC that, again, I just asked them, you don't have to pay me. I can come in and sort mail for you or shadow your attorneys. I can come in 3 times a week. I just want an internship. I want a volunteer opportunity. If you can pay me, great, but I don't need to be paid. I just, want to maintain that relationship. And then, in law school, I worked. And, that's probably not as advisable because your first year of law school is so important. Your grades are very important for that coveted second year summer internship that usually leads to employment. But again, I just knew that I wasn't attending the best law school in terms of academically, right? I mean, it was a very good law school and I got some great experiences, including participating in their moot court competition, where again, I excelled in that. And I think I placed second in the school during my first year of competition. And so it was just about really identifying people that I thought I could get a job from a very early point in my career and just maintaining those relationships with them. And then when the time came, it was about asking them, would you hire me? And that started all the way in high school through college, and it continued in law school. I worked. It was really important to me. Law school is unique. It's different than medical school, right? And I only know that because of my sister. You do 2 years of medical school and then you do 2 years of practice where you're actually doing rounds in different areas of medicine. Law school is just 3 years of studies, and you really have to capitalize on the summers to get that real work experience, because otherwise you won't really know what it's like to be a lawyer. That's one of my criticisms of law school. I think they should do better about training you as to what it really is required of you when you get to a law firm or the DA's office or the PD's office, whatever it is. You should know what discovery is, you should know what a pleading is, you should know how to calendar and file things. These are very basic things that you do learn in your first few years of practice, but I really wish schools would be better about teaching those real skills.
No, those are some great tips. Thank you so much, Camille. So I want to touch very briefly on the Johnny Depp case. We're coming up on almost a year since the trial. And, for many of us watching online, we had never seen so much media attention directed towards this trial. And I believe the last time something like this happened was during the O.J. Simpson case. How did you internalize the fame that came from this trial? Did you expect to get all this attention?
Oh, God, no. No, I would have done things differently, probably. I probably would have warned friends and family, but a bit more than, I even thought about. You're right. It was the first time that, we knew that Johnny would get attention. It's Johnny Depp after all, right? And but never did we anticipate that the lawyers would get similar, fandom and attention. That was really not in the realm of possibilities, something that we contemplated at all. And you're right. I haven't seen, you guys are probably, you're definitely, most of you younger than me. And I remember the O.J. Simpson trial. I remember watching that verdict come in. I was in 6th grade, actually, in that particular teacher's class, and he turned it on. And I remember. And I know Robert Shapiro, again, somebody else that while I was in high school, or excuse me, actually in college at USC, my mother encouraged me to reach out to him because his son was a student at USC while I was at USC. And he had died of a drug overdose. And Bob and Linnell, his wife, had established a foundation in their son's name, the Brent Shapiro Foundation. And I was looking for some type of organization to donate to. My mother said, I just saw Bob Shapiro, the famous lawyer, and his wife on Larry King. You should reach out to him. And I said, right, Mom, because Robert Shapiro is just going to take this random girl's call. And she said to me, well, you don't know until you try. And mothers tend to be always right. I did call. He called me back and he came to San Diego and spoke at the conference that we were hosting. I was the president of Order of Omega, was the Greek Honor Society. And again, I just maintained contact with him. And then when the time came for me, I was in law school, I just asked him for a summer internship, and I worked at his law firm, Glazer Weil. So, you know, again, it just requires you picking up the phone. It requires you staying on top of those mentors, asking them to coffee, you know, making the effort. Like if they live or work in LA or Orange County, make the effort, you know, set up a coffee meeting with them. It could be ask for 15 minutes, ask for 20 minutes. Most people have 20 minutes, right? I mean, it just takes you asking, and then when the time is right, saying to that person, hey, can you give me an opportunity? Or do you know somebody that's looking for a first year, you know, or a recent grad? But how did I internalize it? I mean, I still think I'm dealing with that, to be honest. I find it really bizarre.
Yeah.
I became a lawyer because there's a lot of us. I never really wanted to be famous or sought attention. That's just not who I am. Personality wise, not that, you know, there's anything wrong with people that want to be famous. And obviously a lot of my clients are now. But they're, I find it bizarre, and at times it can be overwhelming, but for the most part, it's been incredibly positive, and people are very nice and complimentary and just want to talk or thank me. And, you know, I'm always happy to talk to friends, family, fans, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's an honor, really. But I take it very seriously, because I realize that the cases I take on, the issue, like, people are watching. And there's responsibility with that, right? There comes responsibility with that. I'm not a perfect person. I will make mistakes. I will take clients that I should not have, and I will, you know, work on things that maybe I don't necessarily believe in as passionately. But at the end of the day, we take an oath, and that's to represent clients, and to do that fiercely. And they expect us to do that for them. So, I mean, it's an amazing career point where I'm at, but it comes with pros and cons.
Definitely. And, you know, I think right now, currently, the most aspired job to have, they ask little kids all the time, and they're always saying they want to become YouTubers, and they want to become TikTok famous, Instagram famous. And sometimes we don't see the downfalls that may come with, you know, having all of this fame, all of this attention. And when we see someone become famous virtually almost overnight, it's sometimes easy to overlook all of the years of preparation, successes, even failures that have occurred along the way. Could you elaborate a little on the experiences that you believe have contributed to your success career-wise?
Honestly, there's no shortcuts to it. Anybody that tells you otherwise is lying. It is a lot of sacrifice. It is a lot of sleepless nights, and it is working harder than anyone else in the room. That is what this job requires. To prepare for trial, which is what people see, right? Which is the glitz, the glamour, really the theater of it all. There are numerous hours of preparation, so that you can think on your feet, so that you can cite to the evidence, so that you have built a good rapport with your client, with your teammates. There are really no shortcuts to it. I think that I always knew what I wanted to do, right? From a young age, from high school really on, when I did mock trial, I knew I wanted to be a trial lawyer. I didn't know in what capacity, like if I was going to work for the DA's office and do criminal law, or if I wanted to do civil work, which is what I do now. But I knew I wanted to be a trial lawyer. And so I think it really helps to have a clear picture as to what you want to do. One time somebody said to me, at any place of employment, right? Let's take your first legal job. Look around, try to find someone whose life you would like to have in 20, 30 years time. and life, not career, but life, because
Mm.
our lives should be a lot more than just our careers, right? That's a big part of it for, especially for a lot of people, but look at whose life you would like to have in that setting. And if you can't find somebody whose life you would want to have, you're in the wrong place. So look out for that type of person, right? And I mean, again, there's no shortcuts to it. It took an amazing amount of effort and perseverance. And thankfully, I had really wonderful parents that when I wanted to quit, and trust me, it happened. There were points in my career where I was like, this isn't for me. Mom, dad, you guys pushed me into it. I want to go work for like an amazing fashion brand, or I want to go, just do something else, because it was hard. It was long hours and a lot of, constructive criticism and especially criticism on writing. And it could be at times defeating, but I stuck with it because I think I knew deep down that I would get to a point where I would feel comfortable, right, in what I do. But what I love about this job is that I learn every day. Every day, there's something new that I learn either from a colleague, from a client, or, I'm addressing something really different. And that's exciting to me. I like continuing to learn. I think that that's what makes my job not boring, besides my more eccentric clients who are definitely not boring as well.
Yeah, I see we're coming up on time. And so
that's okay. We can go over because we started late, so it's fine.
Okay. So I want to move on to some of the questions that our members have asked. And so Clarissa Palacios, I don't know if you're here, Clarissa, she's a freshman here at USC, and she's wondering, how do you balance your professional image given the increase of your social media presence? Do you think the media helps or hinders the administration of justice in the courtroom?
A very good question. I mean, in terms of social media, I don't have really a social media presence. It's something that I'm getting a lot of pressure to do. I think it's hard for me to kind of find the right person to help me with that. I don't have a tremendous amount of time. And I think I'm just struggling to find the right serious type of person that could help manage a social media presence for me. But understands that, I don't want to be like showing memes and things like that. I just think that I'm far too serious of a person in general to do that. So, and in terms of social media, and I don't think it hinders, right? I always direct people when they ask me this question in relation to the Depp case, whether social media played a role and what I think the role it played in that case. I try to remind people that social media, right, was responding to evidence. It was responding to the evidence we were presenting in that trial. Yes, some of it was funny. Some of it was, crude. Some of it was, bathroom humor or inappropriate language, but it was all evidence. There wasn't anything that social media was grabbing onto that wasn't presented during that trial. And so I don't know that it hinders or helps, but I just want to remind everyone that, at least in relation to that case, it was all a reaction to what was happening in that courtroom, which was all admissible evidence. And in terms of having like cameras in the courtroom, I actually think it helps as a society, for society to see justice taking place in real time. I think one of my passion projects, if you will, is that it bothers me that in this country, the judicial system is reserved for the educated and the rich. And yet people utilize the justice system, the legal system, during the worst times of their lives, when, they've lost their children in Uvalde at a school shooting, and they are engaging the first lawsuit, or they have been charged with something criminal. And yet we don't know how to navigate as a society. We're not educated enough about our judicial system. And I think that's wrong. And so to the extent that cameras in courtrooms that are televising trials now are showing people how trials take place and, what admissible evidence is and what's hearsay. And, I think those are good things. I don't think that's a bad thing, as a society, to show what real justice looks like, taking place in real time with real cases in terms of education. I think it's a good thing for us as a society.
Yeah, definitely. So just moving on to Carla Mejia's question. She's a senior here at USC. And she's wondering, despite law school being overwhelming at times, what was your most memorable experience in law school?
Besides graduating, I'm just kidding. I made my son. I would say probably participating in the moot court competition my first year.
Okay.
Being able to go to the appellate court in Pasadena, California, and argue before real justices. That was a really neat experience, and I really enjoyed it. Again, I love being in a courtroom, so I think that was probably one of my more memorable experiences, along with graduating. I was so relieved. I was like, okay, I can finally start working. Well, actually, not yet, Camille. You got to study for the bar.
Yeah, for the bar.
Oh gosh,
get a couple more months.
Yeah, I'd never been in prison, but I'll tell you, studying for the bar, I remember like my first night after the bar exam, I went to dinner with my family, and I was at the Grove in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And I remember like looking around and being like, I haven't been around people in months. Like it felt like, I had been in prison for months. I was like, oh, this is what people look like in like live and living color. Like I was living in a crazy person's house. I had my outlines like on my bathroom mirrors, and I wanted to be always looking at it because I'm a pretty visual learner. So wouldn't recommend that. You gotta get some fresh air while you're studying.
Yeah, definitely. So our last question from our members comes from Brandon Fabian. And so Brandon's wondering, in the trial, we saw your extensive cross-examination skills. And so aside from your mock trial experience, what else would you say set you up to be the great trial lawyer that you are?
I am a avid studier of people. And I really have always, that's how I learn, is I watch. And I watch other lawyers in court. I watch them in deposition, and you pick up things that you would do and things you won't do. And things that you can make your own. But I highly recommend that you watch other lawyers do what they do best. And thankfully, because of cameras in courtrooms, there is a lot of opportunity for you to do that. And so I think that it was that, and then it was being the most prepared person in that room. Right. I needed to know that evidence better than anyone else. And I needed to know it so that, in cross-examination, what you want is the jury or the trier of fact, in this case, it was a jury, to be looking at you and to be listening to your questions, because you're making your points in your questions. It almost doesn't matter what that witness says in response, because the question is actually where you're making the point and making the argument. And I realized at some point during the cross-examination and misheard that two of the jury members in that box actually turned away from her and like physically turned their backs to her and were just looking at me. And I thought to myself in that moment, we got them. Because now they're just paying attention to my questions. It almost didn't matter whether what she said, in response. And that's when you've got them. And so it's about maintaining control in cross-examination, right? In comparison to direct examination, if you look at the job that my colleague and partner Jessica Myers did of Johnny Depp, we wanted all the attention to be on him. You barely saw her, you heard her very briefly, just small little questions. And then it was just on him. We wanted the jury to be captivated by him and for him to tell his story. Everything from even what she wore, she put her hair back, she wore a very muted color. that mattered because we didn't want anything taking away attention from him. Yet when I did the cross-examination, I wore all white. I wanted people to be looking at me. I didn't want them looking at Ms. Heard. I wanted them to look at me.
Wow, that's just incredible to see how there are so many things that go into it. So many it's almost like the optics that are at play, the dynamics that are at play.
Juries see everything.
Yeah.
You realize that. I mean, they see everything, and it is theater. Everything from what you wear to how you interact with each other, with your client. I mean, it is all incredibly important. And you want it to come off genuine and natural, right? I mean, the truth was we really liked each other. We really liked Johnny. We believed him, all of us, you know, that there wasn't one person on that team that thought he had ever been abusive towards Ms. Heard. And we came from different backgrounds, different ages, you know, but we liked him. We believed him and we liked each other. And I think that really resonated in a way that the other side didn't have that commonality. They didn't have that union, and you saw that. And juries pick up on that. And that's really important. The subliminal messages you send when you're in trial are as important as what you say.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Camille. We want to be respectful of your time. But to end, you know, I was thinking we would do a little rapid fire. I say a name and you say the first word that comes to mind. And you're fluent in Spanish, right?
Yes.
¿Qué te parece si lo hacemos en español? Yo te digo el
¿Todo el
nombre de
mundo
una
habla
persona.
español?
¿Perdón?
Sí. ¿Todo el mundo habla español? Oh my goodness.
Sí, todos aquí hablamos español.
In Spanish. For me.
Yo te digo una palabra y tú me dices, te digo un nombre y tú me dices la primera palabra que se te venga a la mente.
Okay.
La primera persona es colombiana, Shakira.
Pelo tremendo.
Pelo tremendo. Johnny Depp.
Mi amigo.
Otro colombiano, Maluma.
¿Cantante?
Sí.
Sí, es cantante.
Sí.
Lo conozco. Terrible, yo sé.
Robert Shapiro.
Robert Shapiro. Wise. No sé la palabra en español, pero wise.
Sabio,
gracias.
Yeah. Y Mario López.
Chistoso.
Okay, thank you so much, Camille, for giving us 30 minutes of your time. We really appreciate it. And really, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you. We are so appreciative of your time, and hopefully we can have you here on campus very soon. We would love to meet you in person.
Love to be back, perhaps next semester. Good luck to all of you in your finals. You're going to do great, and please keep in touch with me and obviously Casey, who's keeps me in line and in check. Always knows where I am. So keep in touch, please, and good luck to all of you. I'm thinking of you and sending you the best, and fight on, guys.
Fight on.